Hi all, today we're actually going to be doing kind of an extension or a continuation of my Origin build series. Now, technically the other week I did do a car-like build, but that build was modded, so I'm not really counting that one, but I kind of realised that I didn't explore, like, all of the options and possibilities for the Origin characters. Really at all. I came up with singular builds that, yes, they're great and they work for those characters, but I wanted to kind of take another swing at it with a couple of things. You know, obviously, in my original Origin build series, I made it so I couldn't reuse pieces of equipment. That I'm going to be getting rid of this time. And I kind of wanted to explore different concepts with these characters. And for this build, specifically for Shadowheart, I wanted to see, can we actually make Trickery Cleric good? Because every time I always say, oh, you know, Shadowheart's a Trickery Cleric, so I'm going to build with that. Everyone's just like, no, Trickery Cleric is the worst cleric subclass, it has absolutely nothing of value, it's really, really bad, everyone should just respect to life or light or whatever as soon as possible. And I'm just like, yeah, I agree, but I think I finally found a way to make Trickery Cleric, and I just mean no multiclassing, single leveling Trickery Cleric, extremely good. And I think you guys are really, really going to enjoy this one. The reason I'm not starting in the level up screen is because I just wanted to answer a quick question that a lot of people have been asking me in the comments, is why do I always have the seeming spell in my hotbar? And that is because of appearance editing. I use the appearance edit enhanced mod to help me respec and redesign characters for these videos. So while it has the seeming spell icon, it actually is resculpt, which lets you completely remake a character, mirror, which lets you change your appearance normally from anywhere, and respec, which basically just triggers like the Withers respec scene. So yeah, this is how I do it. So without further ado, let's get into the build. Alright, I've decided to go ahead and, for the sake of keeping this video relatively short, to just kind of skip the leveling process today. We all kind of already know what Cleric and Trickery Domain does if we're just leveling all the way to level 137 in Trickery Cleric. So I kind of decided to just kind of skip that process and just get right into the kind of final stats and equipment you will need. But if you want to kind of go over the Trickery Domain stuff, obviously the Baldur's Gate 3 wiki is a great resource. It'll give you kind of everything you need to know. But there are, as you know, there are some unique abilities, and I will be going over those here. But yeah, our final level is 137. I feel like this is a good range if you kind of want to get different, cooperation and invasion kind of levels, mainly the main caps being 150 and 125 around that area, and you'll be able to get both at this level. With these stats though, we're going to have a 40 in Vigor. This is going to give us a decent chunk of HP, especially when while we are a melee fighter and a spellcaster, we kind of want to make sure we're tanky enough, but we're not too worried because we can fight at range if we need to, so I feel like 40 is a nice middle ground. Mind is at 20, this is pretty much just enough MP to use all the spells that we want to use, so it works out quite nicely. Endurance is at 20, I would like this a bit higher, but our equip load is still fairly decent with all of our equipment. We're not in fat rolls, so it's absolutely fine. A little bit more stamina might have been nice, but again, we have a lot of options for whether we want to play at melee or ranged, so 20 I think is perfectly fine. I've left strength and dexterity at the base. This is the Vagabond class, by the way. You could probably get a couple of more stat points if you were to choose different classes, but Vagabond was the save file that I had that was complete, and also 14 strength and 13 dexterity, which is the default, is enough to wield all of the weapons I want to wield with this build, so it fits quite nicely. Intelligence we've left at base, we don't need it, and I've gone for a 50-50 split in Faith and Arcane. Faith is going to fuel a lot of our requirements for our incantations, as well as Arcane is going to be able to augment our status builder, because this is a status builder build, mainly poison, because of course Trickery Domain does have Divine Strike poison, and has kind of a shadowy poison theme to it, so being able to get those big poison buildups on our foes is going to be extremely important. Plus our incantation seal that we're going to be using is going to be bumping up our incant scaling based on Faith and Arcane, and I did the math, I did the calculations, this was the highest scaling we could get for the investment. Trust me, your spells are going to be quite powerful. Over to the equipment and the spells and all of that good stuff. This is where the bulk of our kind of playstyle is going to come up. Our main weapon of choice is a mace. I mean, clerics start with a mace, and Shadowheart is kind of, her known for using one, so I decided to go with the bog standard mace here. And it works out pretty nicely. I've gone with a Sacred Infusion to take advantage of a B scaling in Faith, giving us a very nice AR stat of about 634. Now this is split across Holy and Physical, and I know Holy is not exactly the greatest stat, especially in the endgame, but I still feel like it works out quite nicely for a kind of trickery, for like a cleric build, getting a bit of that holy power. And we are using the hold on, let me just remember how to navigate these menus. We are using the Sacred Blade Infusion, which is going to give us a little ranged kind of like guiding bolt, or maybe Sacred Flame attack, and that buffs our weapon after with extra holy damage, so we're going to be dealing a decent chunk. In fact, if I show it off, you see the little beam goes off there, and our AR goes up to 724 for a little while, about a minute, so it's quite a nice buff. But I've also supplemented this with a Poison Morningstar. Now the Poison Morningstar I have at plus 22 here, so this can be more powerful. You max it out. Unfortunately, I couldn't really get the upgrade materials in time. My save file didn't have them, and I'm kind of running short on time to make this video, because I got the idea for this yesterday, last night. But if this was maxed out, it would be a bit stronger, but already this absolutely does its job. Because the Morningstar already inflicts blood loss buildup, we're going to be getting a massive amount of poison, 123, and 60 blood loss buildup. This is scaling with our arcane stat, as well as our strength and dex, but mainly our arcane, because that's our highest stat. And while the overall AR is a bit low, sitting at around a 341, using the Ash of War Wild Strikes, we are able to very quickly build up both poison and blood loss to deal massive amounts of damage. And once we've got that poison build up going and their health is ticking down, we switch back over to the Sacred Mace for those big attacks. Overall, I think being able to swap between these two is really, really strong, getting off all the status effects you need, different damage types. Trust me, you're not really going to have too much trouble with this build when it comes to coming up against foes with resistances. You're going to have plenty of ways of dealing with them. Speaking of plenty of ways of dealing them with various enemies, we do have a couple of things in our left hand. The round shield. This is basically the closest thing I could kind of get to the kind of regular shield that clerics use. You know, in Baldur's Gate 3. I mean, we're playing Baldur's Gate 3, clearly still. I just kind of modified the UI a bit. And as such, I felt like this shield worked out pretty nicely. I mean, Sword and Board is a really fun playstyle in this game if you've never really tried it. The ability to block when we need to is really nice. I've gone for the no skill Ash of War here. It normally comes with parry, but I went with no skill so that we always have access to our main hand Ashes of War. But if you wanted to slap parry or Holy Ground or something else on here, you absolutely can. And our incantation seal of choice is the Dragon Communion Seal. An S scaling in Arcane and a B scaling in Faith. This is going to give us a whopping 343 incantation scaling at this level, which is actually on par with like a 80 Faith Erdtree scale. That it gets maybe like 15 more incant scaling. This thing will absolutely shred. And again, we want the higher arcane for the higher build up. So, and this is going to boost all of our spells, and it gives an extra boost to Dragon Communion incantations. I have one on this build, but it was kind of just a filler slot. So, so you can I mean, that can work. I mean, if you want to use Dragon Communion with this, go ahead, but it's not really on theme. We'll get more into the spells a bit later. As for our fashion, I have gone with the Commoner's Headband Altered. This was kind of the closest thing to Shadowheart's Circlet that I could find, and it felt like it worked pretty well. I don't know why her eyes are glowing so much. Let's just ignore that. I've gone with the Knight armor here because I feel like it was the closest armor I had that could kind of get a mixture of that kind of well-kept armor, but still has the kind of bits of clothing underneath, a bit like Shadowheart's default armor. But but other armors would work nicely. The Vagabond armor looked quite good. Without the cape, if you remove the cape and alter it. In fact, I can actually show that off because I have it here. Yeah, you might decide that you like something like this a bit more, or even something like maybe the Bloodhound Knight set if you remove the cape or something like that. Feel free to experiment with the fashion. The Knight set just felt like a good default, especially since you can get it so earlier in the game, but obviously you'd start with the Vagabond Knight set if you started with Vagabond, but I feel like if you're truly optimizing this build, you probably wouldn't. You might go for something else. But there's a ton of other things I might not have thought of. I mean, I haven't really sat down and looked at all these armor sets in a while, but I quite like the Knight's armor set, so that's just what I decided to go with here. I've also gone with the Knight's Gauntlets, but if you wanted to go for a true Shadowheart look, I mean, this is mainly here just for the AR, but if you wanted to go for a true Shadowheart look, you could get something that still shows off the hands. because normally that is the default, so you could go for something like that if you like. But the Knight's Gauntlets felt pretty decent, so I decided to use them here. And finally, Shadowheart kind of does wear like kind of leathery trousers and boots, so I've gone with the banded boots here just to kind of give that same look. But I also quite like the look of the Preceptor's trousers as well. They look a bit cleaner, but Shadowheart's default look is a bit more brown than black in those areas, so I went with the banded boots, but you can kind of swap it up however you like. The banded boots also are slightly better for damage negation, but overall you should be fine. As for our talismans, I've gone for a pretty bog standard set here. I mean, I've gone for the Edtree's Favour +2 to give us a bit more HP, stamina, and equip load, which is great. The Flock's Canvas Talisman to increase the potency of our incantations. We do have quite a few offensive ones on here, so I felt like it made sense. I've also gone for the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, giving us more attack power whenever there is poison or rot in the vicinity. So if we poison with our Poison Morningstar or some of the spells that I'll show off later, we'll be able to gain even more power, so it's quite nice to have. And the Ritual Shield Talisman. You can use incantations in this game that give you passive healing regeneration, which I would personally recommend. So if you cast one of these and then have yourself at full health, this will raise your defense greatly, meaning you take, while your HP is at maximum, meaning that you take less damage from your first hit. So if you're constantly healing, thanks to passive healing spells like that, and buffs, you'll be able to kind of get this buff over and over and over again without too much effort on your own part. But I mean, I always panic chug flasks anyway, but it's mainly just a bit of extra defense. You can swap this out for something else if you like, but I felt like it was a pretty solid option for this build. But I could also see something like the Shard of Alexander to boost the attack power of your skills, namely that Wild Strike could be really powerful. I could see the Old Lord's Talisman being quite good to extend the duration of some of your buff spells. Feel free to mess around with that, it's entirely up to you. As for the Flask of Wondrous Physic, I've gone with the Cerulean Hidden tier and the Opaline Bubble tier. Again, more tankiness for us, but also the ability to, for a little while, just spam as many spells as we like. It can be really good if the boss is like kind of close to death and you just need him to die, and you don't want to get too close because you're kind of run out of healing. You can kind of go for something like this. I think it's quite a nice effect, but honestly, anything will work here. And finally, the main Trickery Domain Cleric ability, Invoke Duplicity. This is going to allow us to summon a clone of ourselves that is going to be able to help us in battle, giving us advantage on attacks. Normally the Invoke Duplicity clone can't actually attack, but for some reason this one just does and uses our full kit, so hey, I mean, I guess Trickery Cleric got a buff in the latest patch. Don't know what that's all about. So yeah, that is the build. Oh, the spells! I need to show the spells! Where are the spells? Here are the spells. How do I show off the spells? You know what? Let's go to camp for a minute. I apparently didn't trigger that yet. Okay, let's go to camp, and I will quickly show off the spells. So I kind of chose kind of some healing spells here, some debuffing spells, some kind of shadowy trickery spells. So let's get into all of them. Lightning Spear. This is going to be the closest thing we can kind of get to a guiding bolt. Yes, it does lightning instead of holy, but again, that is diversifying our damage kind of portfolio, so we can do different types of damage, again, overcoming resistances when we need to. Golden Vow, going to increase our attack and defense for ourselves and our allies. Again, clerics are about buffing their allies as much as everybody else, so this is kind of like a bit of warding bond action, or bless, kind of the closest thing we're going to get, but an attack and defense increase for us is going to be really nice. Darkness, we get to cast a Cloud of Darkness, giving enemies disadvantage to hit us and us advantage to hit them. Unfortunately, we don't take any Warlock levels in this build, so we're not going to be getting Devil's Sight, but if you equip something like maybe, say, the Eversight Ring, you could definitely make use of this. Blessing of the Erdtree grants greater blessing to self and nearby allies. This is just going to give us even more healing, as well as the Erdtree heal to just give us a massive heal to ourselves, and our allies is basically mass healing word for us. Poison Mist allows us to release a Poison Mist before us. If for some reason we're not able to consistently get close, or if we want to cheese some encounters, we can use Poison Mist to guarantee that we're going to get some poison off. Exeek's Decay, this is the kind of dragon spell that I use to kind of fill a slot here. This is going to allow us to use Scarlet Rot. Scarlet Rot is obviously a very powerful affliction. If you can get poisoned Scarlet Rot and bleed off, you're going to have a fun time. But again, you can kind of fill this slot with whatever. I mean, there's tons of different options here. There weren't really too many, like, holy damage options, but if you wanted to go for something like Lightning Strike or Honed Bolt to kind of stick within that light magic kind of range, you can. I mean, or you could just chuck a rock at a motherfucker. Who cares? There are blood spells here that would work really nice with the Arcane, but I think I'm going to save that for a potential Astarion build in the future. Hell, Frozen Lightning Spear could also be a fun one, actually, so feel free to kind of experiment with your options here. Wrath of Gold actually could be really fun. You know what? I would actually say Wrath of Gold instead. I think Isaac's Decay would actually be the more useful one overall, but Wrath of Gold would be really fun. I think we'll go with that. Next up, Assassin's Approach. It silences our footsteps and reduces our fall damage and our sound. So overall, it's going to give us that kind of Shadow Cleric, like, or not Shadow Cleric, Trickery Domain, like kind of pass without trace, and we're able to sneak up on our enemies and get those backstab critical hits. Pretty cool. Shadow Bait allows us to create a shadow that lures the aggression of foes of a human build. This is basically just minor illusion for us. Quite nice to have. And finally, Lord's Aid, this is basically greater restoration. Alleviates poison, blood loss, sleep build-up for self and allies. I wanted to have the ability to cure poison because I think that would just make sense for us, and getting a spell that can do a lot of those things makes perfect sense to me. And yeah, that is the build. Overall, you're going to be getting a ton of things out of this build. Tons of status effects, ways to debilitate your enemies, pretty powerful attacks overall, the ability to defend. You're quite tanky, you can heal a lot, and you have pretty decent stats across the board. And the ability to use Invoke Duplicity is really going to make this build shine. So, let's get on to the combat showcase now, because actually, I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to do a live combat showcase. And here we are, we're going to be testing today against, well, the tutorial boss, yes. And I know people have had issues with me testing against the tutorial boss before, but they've actually added New Game Plus to this game. I know, they added a lot in the recent patch, they've changed a lot of things about Baldur's Gate 3. So, this is going to be quite a good test, I feel. So, we're going to use Invoke Duplicity. We need to dodge this. Oh, I'm a little bit rusty, but I think we'll be okay. And yep, now we just need to yeah, I'm going to try a Lightning Spear. Let's see how this goes. Wah! Holy moly, okay. That did a bit more damage than I was expecting. Oh, I want to poison him. I want to poison him. Let's poison him. Yeah, get poisoned. Get poisoned. Yeah, there we go. And then if I can kind of show off the Wild Strikes combo here. Man, that clone is really doing work. Yeah, you can kind of see we're able to build up blood loss quite quickly. And now if I kind of show off like the Sacred Blade attack, boom, and boom. I'll quit out the game very quickly. Hopefully the boss doesn't stay dead. And I can show off kind of without the Invoke Duplicity to kind of get a better show of the build. Let's jump right back in. Luckily, my SSD loads very quick. But you can kind of see how, like, the build works out quite nicely overall. We get all of that. Yes, perfect. So, I'll show off the build solo now without the Invoke Duplicity, because I understand that that is considered quite a broken skill with this build. So, we're going to just try fighting him solo now. Let's try this strategy. Yeah, a bit less power now. A bit less pressure right off the bat. As you can see, our shield kind of put in some work there. There you go, we managed to poison him. I might be able to get Alpha Bleed if I'm quick. Yeah, kind of block. Oh, broke my guard. Yeah, you have to be a bit careful with that. Let's use this. I'm definitely rusty. I have not properly done a combat showcase for this game in a long time. Right, we're going to do Wild Strikes now while I'm kind of under the effect of this. There you go, there's the bleed, and he's poisoned, so we get the boost from the rot. There you go, the flask saved us there. Fully charged that. So yeah, overall you got a pretty decent playstyle with this build. Hey, I'm gonna hit him with the darkness. You can't see me anymore. You can't see me anymore. Let's see how the healing on this is. Yeah, that's the passive healing buff, which is doing quite a nice little job for us. Roll that. And we're just going to kind of finish the job. Let's get our Sacred Weapon back out, because it's obviously a bit more powerful. Hey, like a taste of your own medicine. Oh, Jesus. Have not played this game in a while. Yeah, you might want to maybe put some points in the dexterity to get a higher AC. Oh. Yeah, I have not played this game in a while. I mean, I've played this game a bunch. I played Baldur's Gate 3 all the time. Oh. He's not letting me get out a healing spell. There we go. Okay. And... yeah, get a hit off the projectile and the melee attack. And there we go. Let's let him actually die this time. See you later, sucker. So yeah, overall I feel like this build is really interesting. You have a lot of different options. I mean, this is just a boss showcase. As you're kind of exploring the game as well, you're going to have a lot as well that's kind of cool. Like the ability to use things like Darkness and the Shadow Bait and the Assassin's Approach. And Darkness, all that sort of thing is going to be really fun. Poison Mist will let you do some fun interactions with different bosses in the overworld. There's a ton of fun things you can do here. You've got really powerful spells, really powerful weapon arts, ashes. Everything's really cool. The shield is really fun to use. Again, just kind of tanking attacks can be really fun. But yeah, overall, I really, really like this build. So yeah. Happy April Fools, everyone. But if you'd like to see more Elden Ring content in the future, let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.